Luke chapter 21, verses 12 through 19. This text takes us from 5 through 36 in the book of Luke. And in that whole passage, Jesus is talking about two things. He's talking about his return, and he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem, which will take place in AD 72. And his return at some future date, but in excess of 2,000 years, seems to be. And so this is something we deal with a lot with prophecy, where we're getting two things talked about at the same time. We see this with Abraham, for instance, and his son Isaac. That's the promised son, sort of. Really, it's Jesus. You see this with David and his son Solomon, who builds the temple, sort of. Really, it's fulfilled in Jesus. We call this dual fulfillment. And as we look at this whole chapter, you're going to see instances of dual fulfillment throughout the chapter. Don't let that be of any concern to you. Just as you read that, keep that in mind. And so that way you can think of what is really relevant for the immediate audience as Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and then what's relevant for me as someone who's waiting for Christ to return. Now, in the verses before, 5 through 11, a lot of it relates to the beauty of the temple and how Jesus says, this whole thing's going to get taken down. They say, Jesus, when is this going to happen? Hence, Jesus talking about all these things, but he's preparing them not only for the fall of Jerusalem, but also what that's going to happen throughout their earthly ministry. And yet he is also prepping us for how we should be living and waiting until his return. So all of these things are happening at the same time, concurrently. And that's just, I think it's a beautiful and wonderful thing that God does when he gives prophecy. He wants to encourage the people getting it in that day and encourage those who are going to come afterwards. And we see both of those things throughout this. So this text that we're in right now, 12 through 19, you may not think it's very encouraging, but hopefully by the end, you'll see that it is. So in the verses right before, he's talked about wars. He's talked about famines. He's talked about pestilence. And he says, but before all this, before all those things happen, they will seize you and persecute you. So before all this, right, and all this relates to what happened in the verses before, but before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They here is, we should be wondering, all this and they, what is Jesus talking about? They is leaders. And we could be thinking of both Jewish, because he mentions synagogues, but also kings, governors, secular, so we'll say Gentile as well. They will seize you and persecute you. Now remember, this is the week of Jesus' final ministry, or Jesus' final week of ministry on the earth. He is going to be seized in just a few days. He is going to be persecuted severely. So Jesus is promising this will happen to you. This will take place. They will seize you and they will persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues, hence the Jewish leadership, and put you in prison. And you will be brought before kings and governors. Boom. There's this next part. And all on account of my name. Again, they will hand you over. You will be brought before, and all of this on account of my name. So these are promises of Jesus. We usually think of promises of life and joy and peace. These are promises of suffering, promises of persecution. You'd be handed over to synagogues. That's the Jewish people attacking them, put in prison. We see this kind of mass imprisonment in Acts 5, interestingly enough. It doesn't take long for this to be fulfilled. And you will be brought before kings and governors. We see this happen with Paul towards the end of the book of Acts. Multiple times he's talking before kings, governors, appealing all the way to Caesar. And this is going to happen not because you guys are committing crimes, not because you're doing anything wrong, but on account of my name. It is going to be on behalf of Jesus and what they're doing in Jesus' name that leads to this trouble with the world. They will be seized and persecuted. Jesus has warned them throughout his earthly ministry, no servants above his master. If they hate me, they are going to hate you. Now, why, right? Why? Why, Jesus, would you have us do this? Why? And so, you will bear testimony to me. Jesus allows his servants to undergo this so that they get the chance to testify before kings and governors, before Jewish leaders, before the world, that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, come to take away the sins of the world. And that's a wonderful promise. The promise that we will testify to Jesus, this is good news. And as is typical of God's wisdom, he does it in ways that we would not. Jesus wants Paul to go before Caesar. Great. Paul's going to go in chains. But that's just how God likes to do it. And it confounds the wisdom of this world. But it is the wisdom of God on display. So here in this first part, we have our warning. And then Jesus gives this instruction. But, important that we have the word but here. It's kind of standing in contrast to everything that's going to go. With the warning, you're tempted to worry. He says, but make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. So recognize right away that that was a command, not a suggestion. This is a command from him. Make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. So, number one, we are becoming resolute in our mind. And just because his mind does not mean that he's excluding the heart. So mind, heart, soul, right? Fortitude, your spirit, not to worry. And if we stopped right there, that'd be fine. There are many commands in Scripture that tell us just not to worry, but Jesus applies this very specifically, not to worry beforehand. So you know you're going to be brought before a governor. You know you're going to have to give a statement. And so you just sit there mulling over, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? He's saying specifically, don't worry about how you will defend yourself. Don't worry about what you are going to say. Don't start thinking, and I think this is really key. I'm just going to highlight this in yellow. Don't start thinking defensively. Don't start thinking, how do I survive this? How do I get through? Because as soon as we do that, we will tend to censor the gospel. And we don't want to do that. We want to shrink back from declaring anything about the Lord. So don't think about how much you're going to defend yourself. Don't do that. Don't worry beforehand about that. And the other thing that this does is it causes us to rely on our own strength. The goal is not to use rhetoric or powerful argumentation, our own wisdom and our own understanding. We're already in a very, very a situation that's very strange in our world, but wise in the eyes of God. We need to continue to rely on his strength. And that's exactly what Jesus says. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. So another will, I will this time. Before it's been you will or they will. But now Jesus says, I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. Let's not forget what just happened in Luke 20. All of the leaders came to Jesus. Leaders challenge Jesus, and they all walk away unable to say anything. They were unable to resist or contradict what Jesus had said. So Jesus has just demonstrated his ability to do this. And he's telling his disciples, therefore, don't worry beforehand. I'm going to give you the words. Well, they just watched him do that, right? So here's the promise of Jesus' words. And I will say, as many have experienced with this, many of you have probably been in a situation where you're like, Lord, I don't know what to say. And he does so often give us the word we need. That is just beautiful. And we're told to rely upon that, not on our own strength, but on the words he will give us in that moment. We are literally told to make up our minds beforehand, not to defend ourselves, but to count on his words coming through in that moment. This is an act of faith, trust, belief. Oops, that's okay. All right. Then he says, he goes back to the warning, you will be betrayed even by parents. Oops. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends. That's just another fact. This is going to happen. Just like you're going to be imprisoned, you are going to be betrayed even by the closest people in your life. Your parents, your siblings, your relatives, and your friends. Jesus, by the way, is saying this to Judas, who probably at this very moment is beginning to think, I think I'm going to betray this guy. I don't want to follow him to death. I want to follow him to victory, but he wants to go to death, so maybe I'm going to betray him. Judas might be thinking that this very moment, because he's going to go to the priests in this next chapter in the book of Luke. In Luke 22, that's what we're going to see. And so Jesus is saying, hey guys, this is going to happen. You will be betrayed, even by these close people. And in that betrayal, not only will you sometimes be imprisoned, but even they will, once again, put some of you to death. Now, if Jesus is talking just to his disciples, John the Baptist, or not John the Baptist, he's already died. But John, his disciple, seems to be the only disciple who makes it to old age and dies of old age, but still imprisoned in Patmos. But obviously, throughout the last 2,000 years, many believers have been put to death. And of course, on the whole, it's still just a fraction, just some of you have been put to death, but many, many believers have indeed died for Jesus, as people who gave testimony, as people to whom Jesus gave words in the moment, people whose the enemies could not resist or contradict, but still they killed. We see this with Stephen. His words, his sermon, so compelling that his enemies just kind of gnash their teeth and stone him. They don't have any way to refute what he said. Jesus promises that some of them will be put to death. And again, this would be terrifying if not for the fact that Jesus was going to the cross this very week. He summarizes, everyone will hate you because of me. They will hate you. Because, this is important, because of me. Just like before, you will bear testimony to me up here, and before that, I'm not seeing it. Oh, on account of my name. Here we go. On account of my name. Same deal. Here. It's happening for Jesus' sake. That people will throw them on trial, betray them, and ultimately hate them. You need to know, if you're listening to this and you are a believer, there are people who may not know your name, but they hate you because they hate Jesus, because they hate God. That's a reality. It's been a reality for Christians in every age. This is a promise of Jesus. But not a hair of your head will perish. The not is important here. Not a hair of your head will perish. This will not happen. It's the will not that we need. This statement creates a question. How can it be, Jesus, that not a hair of our head will perish, and yet some of you will be put to death? These two things, they seem exclusive, don't they? How can you say that we'll be put to death, and at the same time, not a hair of your head will perish? There's two things, I think, for us to understand here. Here's the first one. Stand firm and you will win life. So that's another you will. This one a promise. If, we could supply the if you stand firm, then you will win in life. So standing firm obviously needs to be done in the face of death. You got to stand firm. When? Until I die? No, even through death you have to stand firm. But if you stand firm through death, then you win life. And the life is so true, so abundant, so full. Whoops, too many circles. So true, so abundant, so full that Jesus can say, not a head of your hair will perish. Now, some take this to mean that Jesus is saying, physically, you will escape harm. And certainly there are examples of that, right? We think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who don't bow to the golden statue. And because of that, they get thrown into a fiery furnace, and the three of them survive. They live even as the guards around them die. And nothing on them is a problem at all. They're good to go. Not a hair is burnt. So that does happen, but I don't think that's what Jesus is driving at here. The command, stand firm, the promise that it comes with life, I think is meant for us to be an understanding that even if this body wastes away, even if you die, if you have life in Jesus, then perishing is something that you're not going to experience. That you are going to live. You will win life and you will win eternal life. You don't need to worry about anything. Just stand firm. I think what Jesus is doing is calling us to a further view of life, one that's beyond this physical body. And he promises not a head of our hair will perish. I mean, not even an atom of you is going to go to hell. You are going to entirely be with God in heaven. But you do need to stand firm. This is what Christians do. They stand firm. So the promise of life for those who stand firm. And then over here, another warning of betrayal and death. And this is the crazy life that the Christian is called to. To be aware that following Christ puts you at enmity with the world, in danger of death and betrayal from the people you love most. But the promise of God's provision in the midst of your trial and the promise of God's gift of life after the trial is over is absolute. It's just as sure as the suffering. And that means a lot to believers in the midst of persecution. Hope it means a lot to you. Certainly means a lot to me. And whatever we face in our lives with the Lord, whatever we face in our battles with the world, he will see us through. His promises are sure. So, brothers and sisters, stand firm.